Hey guys, welcome back to Wild Style. This is Angela. Today I'm going to be making a craft. Since I'm at my kitchen table, sometimes I'll do this upstairs where I have a plastic table, but today I'm just going to try and do it real quick. So I'm going to do it at my kitchen table. So I set up, we just have brown butcher paper I'm going to put down just so I don't paint my table. And this is a painting craft. So I like to have a paint palette, not necessary. You can also use just a paper plate. Then I have a water basin. A water basin, I have it about half full of water. I just use that to wash my brush when I'm switching colors. So if I'm going to use the same color, I won't necessarily wash it out, but if I'm going to switch colors, then I'll wash it out real good. And the water basin makes it so you don't have to run to the bathroom or the kitchen sink to wash your brush out. Let's see. You need a brush. This project is fairly large, so this is about a 1-inch brush, and it's going to be sufficient for this project. I do have smaller brushes for smaller projects, but I don't think I'll need that for this one. I've got some white paint. This is actually a white chalk paint. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then I've got some black paint. And these are also not necessary, but while your project is drying, you can set it on them, and that just allows air to get up underneath it. So you can paint both sides and it will dry a little bit faster. So not necessary, but you can use them if you have them. This project actually got custom ordered in. So this is actually going to be a gift to my nephew. He's serving a 2-year mission for our church in Brazil. So this is actually the shape of the country of Brazil in South America. And then it has his date of when he's leaving and coming back, so when he'll be on his mission. So I'm going to make this for him to give him. He's leaving here in the next couple weeks. And so I thought this would be a fun gift for him. So I'm trying to get that together really quick. So I want to paint the back of the project black. And then the front, I'm going to do white. And the edges, I'm going to do black. Because I'm also going to do the frame part in black. And so that way, when those line up, if I do the edges black, they'll all be black. So everything will nicely go together. So I'm going to need a lot of black to start with here. Sometimes I am picky about my paints. This one's getting old, so it is kind of globby. If I have a... Sometimes I am picky about my paints. My black and whites, not so much. It seems like all the paint brands are fairly similar on blacks and whites, so I don't worry too much about those. I find it's easier to start with the edges, so and it's okay if I go a little bit over because that frame is going to cover up a lot of that. Okay, now that my edges are done, I'm going to go and do the back side. And if I'm keeping something for myself, I may not always do the back side, but if I'm going to be giving something away, or if you're making something to sell, painting the back side does make it look much nicer and much more professional. So I highly recommend that. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to switch gears to the frame. There are lots of different ways you could do the frame. I've done frames to where they look like it's a wood frame, like a kind of a barn wood, weathered wood frame. Those are cute. I've also done them painted to where they look like they're metal and metal frames. This one I'm just going to do black. And on these frames, I like to do the inside first because I think that's the hardest to paint for me for some reason. So I usually start there just to kind of get it over with. When I'm using black, usually one coat is sufficient. If you don't have as good a quality black, you may need 2 coats, but get the blackest black you can find, and 1 coat's typically enough. Okay, then I'm going to work on the outer edge. And painting this doesn't have to look pretty because you could cover the whole thing in black. Okay. Okay. So now my edges of the frame are done. I'm going to do the front of the frame. I'm not going to bother to paint the back because it's going to be up against the other piece of wood, so we won't see it. Okay, I'm done with the black for now. Maybe forever. So I'm going to start getting that soaking. Black is hard to get out, and I'm switching from black to white. So I may actually even have to take this to the bathroom and give it a really good wash out because you don't want any black left in that brush once you start doing the white. So if I was going to do it again, I might have started with the white, but my white may need several coats. Sometimes that happens. So we'll see what we can do. I'm going to swap these 2 places. And since this one's not totally dry, but it's mostly dry, so because I have these, I can flip that over and let it finish drying, but continue to move on in my work. So let me go wash my brush out, and I'll be right back. Okay, now that that's clean, I'm going to try and just kind of dry it as best as I can. A little water's going to be okay. I'm just mostly making sure right now that I got all the black out. So by kind of squeezing it and then checking my paper towel, the water's clean. I see no black there. So I know that I'm safe to go ahead and move on to my white. Okay. My paint, I don't know if you can even see that, but it has really settled. This has been a while since I've painted because it's been summer. So we just haven't been in the paint for a while. So I'm going to stir that up really good. Now, for most of the crafts that I use just a generic acrylic paint, which is a water-based paint. Goes on wood, super easy. It's fairly cost affordable. When I do white, though, I switch to chalk paint. And the reason is, if I use a white acrylic paint, it takes me probably 5 to 7 coats of white to get it to cover well on the wood. And I don't know about you, but I don't have time for that. So I switched to a chalk paint. Now, chalk paint is thicker and it does show more brush strokes. So what I like to do is, as I paint with the chalk paint, I'll stick a little in my container here. And then I just try and keep my brush really nice and wet. Lots of water in my brush kind of helps thin out the chalk paint a little, and it helps hide those brush strokes. So because I just washed my brush, it's pretty wet still. But it does go on. It's going on nice and thick. And maybe a little bit too thick, so I'm just going to dip it in a clean water side and just thin that out just a hair. So now because I've got black on the edge, I know that my frame's going to come in, I don't even know how big that is, 3/4 of an inch, half an inch. Anyway, so I don't need to go all the way to the edge where the black is. I just need to get it close enough that none of that wood's going to show through. The other thing you can do with the chalk paint, if there is more lines than you like to see, so some people like a little bit of the lines showing through. It kind of gives it a classically rustic, handmade look. But if you're not one that likes that, you can also, once it's fully dry, so about 24 hours after you've painted it, you can go back over just with a really, really light sandpaper. So not a huge heavy grit, just a real fine grit sandpaper, and lightly kind of rub off some of those brush strokes. Lightly sand off, I could say, some of those brush strokes. I'm just adding water though, and it's taking a lot of it out for me, but still giving it a nice coverage. And so I find that with the chalk paint, I can get away usually with 1 to 3 coats. Most of the time, 2 is what I typically do. Just depending on how wet you had it and how thick it goes on, that kind of depends on how many coats you end up doing. The other thing that's essential to have is paper towels, at least for me, because I tend to paint my fingers. Okay, so then, well, my white paint is still wet. I'm gonna just pick this up. This is how I get paint all over my hands. I'm just gonna kind of not actually touch it. I'm just gonna kind of gently line it up just to make sure that I don't have any wood showing through, and that I've got white out as far as I need to. Mine looks great. I don't see any wood showing through on the edges once this gets glued into place here. So that's perfect. That's what I needed to know. So I'm gonna put that back. And I'll let the white fully dry. Come back in an hour, 2, and do a second coat. It is going to need a second coat. You can see it's kind of splotchy looking, and so that second coat will help with that. Hopefully that'll be enough, and we don't need a third coat, but we'll see how it goes. I'll let you know. Okay, so now that that's dry, 2 coats is going to be enough for this project. And I'm going to put on, this is the vinyl that's pre-cut out, that has the shape of Brazil, says Brazil, and then it has his times that he will go on, be gone on the mission. So just going to peel, backing off. Okay, then I'm going to do my best to center it top to bottom and side to side. And sometimes I'll even just kind of lay the frame on top of there and see how it's looking. Okay, then I'm going to press that down. So there are some scraper tools you can get. I do have one, but I don't have it with me at the moment, so I'm just going to use my fingernail a little bit. And peel these off very slowly. Okay, then I'm going to glue the frame piece on the top. And I like to use this Duco cement glue. Works really well for gluing wood to wood. And then once I glue it, I will take the black and I will just go and touch up any spots you can see once I get that glue on. But a lot of times you'll have just little spots you can see. And so I'll just touch up the edges. If you want, you can put a picture hanging, pound in a picture hanger on the back so it can be hung up on the wall. I touch up a little white spot there, but otherwise, that's what this is going to look like when it's all said and done. So hopefully you will like it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.